So, how much was your mother's inheritance? LOL. At John's words, I was taken aback. After my mother's funeral, without a single word of consolation, he said that to me, who was downtrodden. He probably thinks that because I was checking the balance on my phone, my mother's inheritance has been transferred to me. But if so, he is a terrible human being. It was about $674,117. $674,117? That's it? Well, even after taxes, you should still have tens of millions. Reluctantly answering, I watched John as he mumbled to himself, grinning slyly. What a distasteful smile. I don't know what he's thinking, but things won't go as he wishes. However, the next day, John quickly acted on his ideas. But this thoughtless plan would end up costing him everything. He hadn't realized it yet. My name is Emily Johnson. I got married at 20 through an arranged marriage. My husband's name is John. He's a 25-year-old company employee and the eldest son of the Johnson family. However, the second son, Tom, moved out after graduating from college and cut off all ties. Because John was like an only child, he was adored by his parents. Honestly, I didn't want to marry John. But my family has been running a business for generations. Due to my prestigious position, I couldn't oppose what my parents decided. Our marriage wasn't based on love. It was far from a happy marriage. Unfortunately, we couldn't have children. We married young, so it was hard to give up on having a child. But even after seeking medical help, things didn't go as I hoped. Hey, barren woman. Is the cleaning done? At first, my in-laws cherished me, but after a few years, my mother-in-law started calling me barren woman. You should be able to conceive if you do things right. What a waste of money. My father-in-law made sarcastic remarks every day. Even knowing this, John never took my side. He would just read newspapers or take naps, making loud snoring sounds. When I wanted to work for a change of pace, he said, "If you work, people will think we're struggling." Back then, it was common for women to become housewives after marriage. But living with my mother-in-law was hell every day. Nobody helped me. I couldn't consult my parents or escape this arranged marriage. Yet, I endured every day, hoping for better times. However, things never improved. 20 years after the wedding, when I turned 40, my father-in-law passed away in an accident. After his death, it was discovered that his company had evaded taxes. All assets were seized to pay back taxes and penalties, and the company went bankrupt. The large insurance money for my father-in-law was used for this purpose. We were left with only the house. I thought it would be hard for John, who was 45 at the time, to find a new job, but my parents introduced him to a new one. Thanks to them, he got a job quickly. But my mother-in-law became like a shell of her former self, aging rapidly. For a while, she didn't even have the energy to insult me. But she had a stroke and required care. Because of this, I no longer have the luxury to think about fertility treatments. I'm already 40. I had kind of given up in my heart, but this became the real turning point. John, as a matter of course, puts me in charge of caring for my mother-in-law, and on his days off, he spends his day moping around as he did before. John, I wish you'd help me with your mother's care once in a while. One day, I gathered the courage to tell him this. It would help me so much if he could assist even just one meal on his days off. But John frowned at my words. Huh? I'm working, you know? Let me rest on my day off. I wonder if John realizes that I don't really have days off. After my father-in-law's company went bankrupt, my parents are worried about me and are finally telling me to come home. But what will happen to my mother-in-law if I go back to my parents' house now? We currently have a caregiver come once a week, but I doubt we can afford one daily. Even after being treated harshly and sarcastically, I couldn't just abandon her. John started leaving early even on his days off. Apparently, he felt uncomfortable under my gaze when he lounged around. My wife won't even let me relax at home on my days off. I heard through the grapevine that he's been saying this to neighbors, and that he goes to a spa alone. The neighbors know that his mother needs care. Yet John speaks as if putting all the caregiving on me is normal. He probably doesn't think about how that makes him look. I felt bad for his mother, who once adored John, but now he wouldn't even visit her after she became ill. "It's because of you that John doesn't come to see me." I would sometimes hear this. But when I'd offer to leave, she would suddenly go silent. After another 20 years of caregiving, it finally ended when both in-laws passed away. I was approaching 60. I no longer had feelings for John, but had come to terms with various things. I figured I'd spend the rest of my life in this house. At least John was dedicated to his job. Because of his work, I could continue living like this. We might not have been a loving couple, but I was thankful in that regard. John never tried to kick me out. He probably thought it was too late as well. John still left the house on weekends, so I enjoyed my time alone. I even took up pottery and made some friends. For the first time since getting married, I was enjoying my life. But that, apparently, irked John. "I'm working, and you're just playing around." One day, he burned the bag I used for pottery class in the garden. "What are you doing?" Instead of getting lost in weird hobbies, do housework. My bag had pottery materials and my pouch inside. It was too late to save them from the fire. I was furious. Though I felt it was too late, we still had a long road ahead. I even considered divorce. But then another tragedy struck. My parents passed away suddenly. My father died from a sudden illness, and a month after his funeral, my mother followed. I was devastated. My older brother Robert had taken over my father's company. Both funerals were busy, and I was bedridden for a week after my mother's. It must be mental exhaustion. Friends from pottery class checked in on me, but John just mocked me. "How long are you going to sleep?" Even after my mom's funeral, I wasn't sleeping that much. Those without jobs have it easy, huh? While it might be a valid point, as words from a husband to his wife, it scores 0. The next day, I lifted my heavy body and resumed my usual daily routine. I didn't have the luxury to enjoy my hobbies, so I just got by with the bare minimum. John, who didn't care about my feelings at all, seemed satisfied. Then, sometime after my mother's funeral, I remembered that the payment deadline for the funeral home was approaching and checked my balance on my phone. Since Robert was busy with work, I had promised to make the transfer on his behalf. But John, not knowing any of this, sneered and spoke to me as I was checking the balance. "So, how much did you inherit from your mother?" LOL. His words stunned me. The funeral was over, and he said this without uttering a single word of consolation to me. Maybe he thought the inheritance was deposited because I was checking the balance, but that's just unthinkable. It was about $674,117. $674,117? That's it? Well, even after taxes, there should still be tens of millions left. John muttered and grinned. What a repulsive smile. I don't know what he's thinking, but things won't go his way. I didn't say anything to him and just quietly put my phone away. I guess John, as expected, read the discomfort in my not saying anything. Well, you've had it tough. Get some rest early today. In the awkwardness, John spoke with rare kindness. But feeling disgusted, I didn't find solace in his words and went to bed early that day. However, an incident occurred the next day. John, as usual, left for work after breakfast. Then, I received a call saying he hadn't shown up at work. I was taken aback. This had never happened before. Worried that he might have been in an accident, I hurriedly called John. But there was no answer. As I anxiously paced around, I understood everything when I stepped into the living room. On the table, there was a divorce form filled out by John. Seeing that, I instinctively checked where I kept my cash card. As expected, my cash card was gone. Unbelievable. Without thinking, I murmured and sighed. It probably wasn't an accident or an incident. John likely vanished on his own. Thinking back, he seemed restless in the living room that morning. Having stolen the cash card, John probably intended to start a new life, discarding me. The reason he didn't kick me out before was likely because he was after my parents' inheritance. The fact that he stole my cash card was proof. However, I remained calm. Or rather, there was no need to panic. I slowly filled out the divorce papers and took them to the city office. John had sown the seeds of his own undoing. It's too late for regrets, and I intended to make him realize that. I properly informed his workplace. I can't reach him either, but it doesn't seem like an accident. I'll let you know as soon as I get in touch. I apologize for the inconvenience. They kindly replied that they'd treat it as paid leave for the day. I envied John for having such a considerate workplace. Originally, it was a company introduced to him by my parents. While I hoped he'd remain sincere to his job, he was now a stranger to me. Afterwards, I successfully submitted the divorce papers. I wondered why I hadn't ended the relationship sooner, considering how easily I had regained my freedom now. As I was packing my things to leave, my phone rang. It was a call from John, who did not answer when I contacted him. I knew what he'd say. Ignoring the call, I continued packing. However, the calls kept coming. The house landline finally began to ring. It was probably John, but I reluctantly answered the phone since it was too annoying. Hello? When I casually said that, as expected, I heard a panicked voice from John on the other end. Is that you, Emily? Yes. Didn't you call? I got a message that you didn't come to work. You need to contact your workplace immediately. That's not the issue right now. However, John didn't seem to listen to what I was saying. Interrupting me, he shouted, I can't withdraw any money. I couldn't help but burst out laughing. Finally realized, I thought. He must not have noticed since he seemed to have stolen it in a hurry. Well, of course, you can't. You burned my cash card. What? Don't remember? It was in the bag for the pottery class. I replied, laughing. John seemed flustered. Then, what about this cash card? Isn't that your mother's cash card that has almost no balance? I wouldn't know. After my mother-in-law passed away, I asked John several times to settle her affairs. I went to the bank myself, but was told it was impossible since I was not an inheritor. The cash card was left untouched with just a few thousand yen. You must be joking. You have to sort out the belongings of those who are no longer here, right? I told you to do it eventually. Don't blame others. So, what should I do with this cash card? Unless I go and take care of it, there's nothing you can do. John seemed to be complaining about something in response to what I said. However, I had no intention of replying and remained silent. It seemed that John, losing patience, had returned to the bank counter and was explaining the situation to the bank employee. I seemed to have accidentally burned the cash card. Can't someone else handle it on my behalf? I'm on the phone with my wife now. It seemed like he put the call on speaker, as I could hear the troubled voice of the bank clerk. I was puzzled by what was being said. John, what are you talking about? Someone else can't just do that for you. What? Our divorce papers were accepted earlier. Thanks for preparing it. Goodbye. I said what I wanted to say and hung up the phone. My voice must have been heard by the bank clerk. I wonder if John's face is pale or red right now. Just imagining it made me laugh. Now, I should leave the house before he returns. With that thought, I quickly packed my things. I then left the house. My destination was my family home, which had become vacant after my parents passed away. In fact, I had inherited that house too. The assets of my mother, who ran a business, amounted to $87,692,000. But inheriting such a large amount in cash would not end well if John found out, especially since we had no children. Therefore, I only inherited $6,745,550, enough to live comfortably. The rest included the family home, my mother's beautifully preserved kimonos, and my father's antiques. If appraised, these items would be worth a significant amount. Of course, I had Robert's, my brother's, permission. After getting married, Robert moved out. He was concerned about the family home being vacant. He has children and also took over the family business. He was grateful to only inherit cash. Through discussions, we had peacefully settled the inheritance. After arriving at my parents' home, I informed Robert that I had divorced John and would be living there. If Emily stays at the family home, it won't be vacant, which is reassuring. But are you really divorcing John? Are you sure about that, Emily? Yes. We don't have children, and both our parents have passed away. If both of us want to divorce, I think it's for the best. I want to restart my life, and I have no regrets. Robert was concerned about me being alone, but it's better than living as John's servant for life. If I could spend the rest of my life in this house where I spent time with my family, I would be happy even if I were alone. John kept calling me again and again after that. However, he seemed confused and didn't realize I was at my family home, so he never came. That day, I spent my time peacefully alone. The house without my family was indeed lonely, but I felt truly relieved. The next day, I reluctantly headed out to make a bank transfer. John had my ID. It was a bit troublesome, but I headed out at 6 a.m., assuming he would be asleep, to get it. As I returned home, I was met with the smell of alcohol as soon as I opened the door. Ugh, I thought, making a face of disgust. Entering the living room, beer cans were scattered everywhere. To add to that, my ID was torn up and left on the table. This is terrible. No matter how angry one is, who tears up someone's ID like that? I gathered the torn pieces, put them in my bag, also took a few clothes, and returned home once. Then I headed to the bank. As I approached, I was called out. Emily. John. To my surprise, John was lying in wait for me. I noticed your ID was gone, so I thought you'd come here, haha. Whether I come here or not is none of your business. Don't be like that. We've been together for years. Even though the divorce is finalized, he dares to say such things. I ignored him and entered the bank. Even then, John kept trying to woo me. However, I continuously ignored him. Then, it happened. Isn't that John and Emily? Someone approached and called out to us. Tom? Why are you here? It was John's younger brother, Tom. Both John and I were surprised by the unexpected reunion with Tom, who we'd been mostly estranged from, only meeting at funerals. In the 40 years since I married John, this was about the third time I saw him. Tom seemed to have wanted to sever ties, but his parents had pleaded with him to at least attend family events. We had met at my mother-in-law's funeral just a few years ago, so he recognized us. Yeah. I'm here for Mom's inheritance. I was planning to check the balance and then inform you both. Mom's? John's eyes lit up. I was also surprised. I thought it was just a few dollars left in her account, but according to Tom, there were also unclaimed investment trusts from a long time ago and a safe deposit box rented when our father-in-law was alive. Tom had heard about this from my mother-in-law. Before she passed, she had said, "If something happens, you handle the paperwork." It seems Tom had been busy and only got around to it now. You know, Tom looked at me and John with an apologetic expression. "What is it?" "Well, in the safe deposit box, along with the jewels, there was a letter. Mom said she's leaving all her assets to Emily Johnson." "What?" I was taken aback by Tom's words. But John seemed even more surprised than me. Tom pulled out a letter from the file he had. I recognized that envelope, because it was the one I bought for my mother-in-law when she asked me. Clearly written on it in shaky handwriting was, "All the jewels and assets in the safe deposit box are to be left to Emily." I remembered my mother-in-law painstakingly writing it. Is that the letter? Should I bring it out? I might say, but I was coldly told, "It's none of your business." Maybe she wrote this at that time. I involuntarily covered my mouth. Emily took care of our mother all by herself, right? She wrote that she's sorry for being mean to her. She probably told me to handle this because she thought John would cover it up. John, sitting next to me, turned beet red and started trembling. Well, I never really intended to inherit, but I guess I have to go through the process since I'm technically an heir. It's just going to be in Emily's name, so that's no problem, right? Tom said matter-of-factly, probably unaware that we were divorced. After that, I was called to the counter. John, though, seemed to have no energy to follow. Even though he didn't have anything urgent, he just sat in the lobby. I managed to reissue my cash card, transfer money to the funeral parlor all on the same day. Well then, I'll be going. I'll contact you again, Emily. Leaving behind a stunned John and Tom, I safely returned home. I received a formal contact from Tom later. John was ranting that the letter was invalid, but Tom persuaded him saying, "Respect Mom's wishes." However, John wasn't convinced, so he consulted with a lawyer. While my mother-in-law's letter wasn't recognized as an official will, the lawyer suggested settling it through discussion considering fees and other costs. Eventually, John was convinced to inherit the house. The mutual funds weren't that high in value, and he reluctantly gave up on the jewelry and other assets. Eventually, I formally inherited my mother-in-law's assets. If Emily gets Mom's inheritance, then I should get my mother-in-law's, right? John reportedly argued this with the lawyer, but it was a different story. It was embarrassing. Even when calmed by the lawyer, he wasn't satisfied. Eventually, he found out I was at my parents' house and showed up. I was wrong. Let's start over. Realizing he would get nothing, he knelt down at the entrance and begged to be remarried. What do you mean start over? There was never any love between us to begin with. What's there to restart? I finally told John what I had always wanted to say. He went silent, seemingly full of regret, which made me smile. At least you still have the house, right? Oh, did you notify your workplace? If you're that desperate for money, work hard. Don't lose your job, okay? I conveyed just that and closed the door. It was finally over. My bank account showed what was left by our two mothers. With that, I believed I would be able to live comfortably. John, in the end, was absent from work without notice and got fired. So I warned him. His only redeeming quality, his passion for work, was lost. Thinking back, maybe he worked hard not out of responsibility, but to maintain his own dignity. Without anyone left to show his dignity to, and without the easy money he had hoped for, it wouldn't be surprising if he had lost his will to live. We've been together for many years, and as you can imagine, I was worried, but that's all. I have no intention of helping him. I truly apologize for causing such inconvenience to you, Emily. Only Tom apologized to me, knowing everything. He also told me, you don't have to deal with John anymore. I believe he must be living happily now, having recognized the dysfunction of that family early on and leaving home at a young age, sparing his family from getting involved with that house. I heard that John has become a recluse, but he's of an age to receive a pension, so he should manage somehow. He had the nerve to say to me, "Let's start over." He should just think about starting over on his own. After that, I started attending pottery classes again. My friends were glad to see me return, and I never thought that days spent solely for myself could be this enjoyable. I even met someone wonderful at that pottery class. I'm done with marriage, but I've started to think that perhaps being with someone who loves me might be better than being alone forever. Even though I sometimes feel it's too late, just like during my divorce, I believe it's never too late as long as I'm alive. No matter when, no matter the age, anyone can find happiness. That's what I believe.